up that have been continued a number of times, and I'd like us to conclude our discussions and move on to the next business that's waiting for us later in January and February in the month beyond. So here we are on item number 10, and Henry, I'm going to welcome you back and rely on you for your staff report. This is a discussion and action item for direction to staff regarding reprioritization of the capital improvement budget.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is that working? You might recall I was here in the fall, gave you some bad news about a grant that we did not succeed in getting. But the maybe positive in it was that a year ago when the council was putting together the budget, they put $200,000 towards this bike project as an incentive though to get the grant. So there's $200,000 that's in the budget that we were asked to talk about what could be done with it. So I'm going to right from the front end preach a little bit of caution and not haste, because I know the temptation is there to do something with money because we want to benefit our citizens. I get it. Trust me, I'm right there with you. But when you look at the bike plans that were done to get to this point, they were designed as an integrated system, and I think there's a danger. I'm not saying it's wrong or bad, but I think there's a danger if we spend this somewhat more limited pot of money in piecemeal fashion. So I'm just respectfully requesting you think about that as we go through this. So we tried to think about what could be out there that the $200,000 would go for. And there's a couple, we tried to put together a laundry list without getting too much into the weeds and the details, because our thinking was we'd give you some ideas and some examples, and the hope was that you would give us direction in one more particular subject area, then we could come back with a much more concrete and accurate plan. Because one of the things I do have to share with you is, given it's just $200,000, I'll get to the list of possible projects that I use as examples. But when I looked at the money and got into some of our records, I do have to tell you that we drew costs from all sorts of documents, some old, some new. And so some of the cost estimates I think are just a little bit virgin and stale. That's another reason I think we need to, if we decide something on that list is really worth doing, we ought to really look at it and see what it's going to cost us. We came up with different possibilities for the money. One, obviously, is retain the money for use as in-kind portions for future grant applications. Didn't work this time, put it aside and try again. The piecemeal piece, fund one or more smaller bicycle pathway improvements. Put it to where it was intended, at least get something for your buck. There was a companion project. The one that was for a grant was just for State Route 116, was Class 1 bike path. That was share lane bike paths. There was a companion project with Class 2 and Class 3 in Sharrows. That hasn't been designed, it's just contemplated. So another possible use of the money would be to get that designed so it's shovel ready. The caution I have to give you is, as we've talked about here before, we learned from this grant process just what the grant reviewer's focus was. And it's on standalone bike paths, it's on things that connect people, it's on, I was told by multiple people, there's a real serious component of connecting to affordable housing and disadvantaged folks. We didn't have that in our grant application. So without that, I'm not so sure that that's a path we want to pursue. I think we've got a lot of tough competition. It's going to be a hard road. I'm not saying it's not possible. We're obviously a little wiser this time. And then last, trying to think a little bit outside the box. I looked through the CIP, and something that jumped at me was that there were 3 places where there's no sidewalks, where it's just roadway, and some of them are dangerous. And so it seemed to me that one possible outcome would be to spend this money to fix some of that. Because when you look at what this money was for, it came under the umbrella of the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, keyword pedestrians. And I do believe some of these places, if there were sidewalks, they would also benefit bicyclists. So I gave examples. They're not meant to be the be-all and end-all, but just to try and give you an idea what that money might do. So there's 4 that are the smaller bicycle improvements. And I did find a mistake, I have to tell you. Number 1 and 4, if you look at the street endings, you'll see that they kind of double each other. That's not intended. Number one is Pleasant Hill Avenue to Washington Avenue, and that's from Bodega up. And then number four is Pleasant Hill from Covert Lane down to Washington, so they don't overlap. To give you a rough idea what that would be, the old estimate was about $50,000 for Pleasant Hill Avenue to Washington, and about $110,000 from Pleasant Hill, up along Pleasant Hill to Covert Lane. And that seems about right, because the length is about double. Talk about South Main Street between Hillsburg Avenue and Eddie Lane, I guess that's up by Emily, that was about $40,000 they're talking about, just to give you an idea.
And so can you say what these are they shareds, are they lines? Can you please explain them to us?
I'd have to go back and look, I can't tell you off the top of my head.
And so it would be
Okay.
helpful if we have questions, we can get them in public comment instead of
I
getting
can
in
look.
dialogue. We haven't even asked questions of our staff yet, if you can refrain from that, thanks.
Then the other example is sidewalk gap closure projects. There's actually four. The three identified were, there's two on Bodega Avenue at the west end of town. One right after you cross the Tascadero Creek coming into town, and then up toward the crest of the hill also. And then there are portions of Gravenstein Highway north at the Covert Lane intersection. There's a piece between the shopping center and the main part of town that has no sidewalks. Those range in price from the shorter piece of Bodega Avenue was estimated at about $80,000 to that Gravenstein Highway intersection was about $300,000. Just to give you an idea. So our recommendation is if the council is willing to have a conversation about where they want this to go and allow us to put together a much better plan and get it down to some details so we know what we're signing up for.
Okay, are there questions for Henry from the council before we open this to public comment?
Did you give a figure on the item number 2 under smaller bicycle pathway improvements, Morris Street to McKinley of around 110? Did I hear that correctly?
No, sir, it was fourth one, Pleasant Hill Avenue, Covert Lane to Washington Street was $110,200. The Morris Street was about $36,000 was the estimate.
Morris to McKinley was about 36?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Councilmember Slater?
In the CIP, the cost estimates for the city street bike lanes, there are 3 categories there.
Talking about page A3, sir?
I'm talking about page A3, exactly. And those figures, I'm thinking are probably, I know that they're at least a couple of years, probably past their use-by date. But the question is still relevant. Does that figure include design, or is this just an estimate for construction? Do you know what that is?
When you say the 3, you're talking about the Class 2 bike lanes, the bikeways on local streets,
And the class,
gyros,
right,
Class 2, those three.
the 2s, the sharrows, and the 3s.
Yeah, they total $545,000 and change. That money would include the design work.
That includes the design
That's the one
work.
I mentioned earlier that hasn't been designed yet.
Right, okay.
So that's design and construction.
Okay, well, that's good. That's the only question I have, thank you.
Okay, Vice Mayor Glass, questions?
Given what you have concluded after reviewing the grant application where we lost, and I think you had discussed in the past that we might reapply next year to the same program. Are you seeing any opportunity, are you seeing either that program or some other programs as opportunities where we have at least a 50-50 chance, or we have a fair chance of actually?
I wish I could answer that. I don't have a frame of reference yet for that, ma'am. I wish I could tell you, but I don't know. I haven't been at it long enough in this arena to really have a judgment.
Okay.
Did attend the meeting at SCTA with their staff and city managers, and we went over that whole grant application process. And I do believe that it's not the only definitive statement we can say is our chances would be a lot better this time. we know some of the mistakes that were made with the grant application last time, and we have a better approach. But there's no way to tell whether it reaches 50-50 or, you know, it's enough of an enhanced chance to be worth it or not. We just don't know that information, but we would be giving it a better shot for sure.
So I'm asking that because I'm mindful of what you said about piecemealing it versus not. So, you know, the $200,000 question is, do we keep our powder and hopefully leverage that by having the match so we could reapply, or do we do these small projects? To me, that's the real question.
Well, and I think you have a valid point, and I would venture to say that I think maybe keeping the money is to give us the flexibility in the future would be the wisest course. I really do think it's a smart thing to do.
Thank you.
So we missed this grant, and I think we can make a stronger application now that we understand what they're emphasizing, because connecting people and connecting affordable housing on Petaluma Avenue and Healdsburg Avenue, I think is really clear when we have, you know, a project at the south part of town, bringing those people into downtown, et cetera, et cetera. So I think we have a good chance of being much more effective in that grant. And I'm wondering, are there other grants or is there other money we can go after?
It's a
Because
possibility. I've been trying to get myself educated on what all that stuff is and where it might come from.
Well, I'm thinking that our voting public is really frustrated because we don't have stuff on the ground yet. And we heard that the last election cycle, and we're still in that same place. And I think there's an interest in finding money so that we can get something on the ground and have a network. And I think ideally, all of us want all of everything, our local streets network connecting to the main streets as well, the main highways. If you could help us by researching that, other opportunities, I'd also like to work with you in the SCTA to see if there's something we can go after there, because, for instance, the city of Healdsburg has gotten quite a lot of money for their Foss Creek Trail right downtown. And somehow we have to be a more successful applicant or a more demanding city or something to see if we can chase that money more effectively too.
I have to tell you, they've been a big help to me.
They are really helpful staff.
Some time ago, I went and spent some time with them, with a couple of people, where they really led me and taught me about the different grants that they administer and some of the do's and don'ts. So I feel a lot better about the future there.
Yeah.
I have to balance that with a little bit of frustration, because I've asked, I want to set my calendar up, I want dates so I don't miss anything. And the pat answer was, well, we don't know it all, we'll let you know in good time.
It's only early January.
Yeah.
This year's calendar will roll out. So any other questions of staff before we open this for the public? No? All right, so if people would like to comment on this issue, this is the reprioritization of our capital improvement project list. We've got Lynn, we've got Jonathan, any other speakers want to get in line? Thank you, I'm glad you're here at this late hour, still.
Thank you. Just, there has been some talk about using that fund, that $200,000, for doing the streets that are unaddressed in the master plan, those that tend to be around the core of the town area. And I had concerns about that, other people have too, and accordingly, I asked 3 bicycle experts to look at those designs, look at those plans, and speak to them, evaluate them. And I was doing this because the master plan has never really been evaluated as to the value and the need for these things. They weren't evaluated when they were first proposed and with the original county meeting. When W-Trans was reviewing this for feasibility, they just reviewed for feasibility. Is it possible to build these? How can we build them? Do they fit? Do they work? But not, is it the right thing? Is it the right need? These 3 experts found a lot of fault with some of the designs and felt that there was cause to redesign it. And if I could cite a couple of examples. One is they felt that it would not be good at all to have a bike lane going downhill on Bodega Avenue. They said, you know, first of all, they said that route is only, they felt that route is only good for those who are very competent, who are professional, not kids, families, older people. And that those people travel about the same speed as the traffic or as the speed limit, and they do not want that car going alongside them. They want to occupy the center of the lane and be very visible in there. Another situation where there was some agreement was that traffic lanes on Morris Street weren't appropriate. Sharrow's would have been better because there are many commercial driveways there with cars going in and out, and if you have a traffic lane up against parked cars, there's a natural tendency to look for the gap, and then when you see it, go for it. But you don't pull out far enough to see that bike going 20 miles an hour down the side of the road just 3 feet away, and you broadside that bike because you go for the gap, you don't see them coming, and that is where the most accidents happen with bicyclists in town. These experts, one was Gary Helfrich, who's most of you know who he is, John Cicerelli, who has a business called Bike Solutions, who knows one of the councilmen well here. And anyway, I feel that before you spend money in that direction, there needs to be a lot more looking at what we really need in the town core.
Before you leave, can you give us the third name just to complete your sentence? It was Gary, John, and who's the third one?
Yeah, John asked me if I knew the Gurneys when I was showing him around.
Yeah, but you're not saying I'm an expert. Who was the third person you interviewed? All I want to know.
There's Lowell Snyder, he lives on...
Okay, got it. I know Lowell.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jonathan Greenberg from Sebastopol. So I guess I'm speaking again, I guess, about what we do with the money, what the city council creates and doesn't. Over the past 5 years, we've had tax increases, about $1.5 million a year being added to the city revenue. The city seems to use the money to expand city positions and provide raises, of course, the public safety and fill gaps. But in terms of public services, it has really been, an expansion of public services has not been something that the city council has been able to deliver to the public. This seems to be an opportunity to actually deliver something finite instead of a study about something that private enterprise might do. 3 years ago, I spoke here of a Web 2.0 back channel. The notion that instead of deciding what you're going to do, you 5 individuals, based upon the 20 people who could manage to be here in the room this late, we actually create a participatory budgeting system in which people in our community, particularly people, the 99% who don't appear in this room, could be polled and express our opinions on what we would like to see done with our tax money. This is a perfect opportunity for that. It's called participatory budgeting. It's a polling system, and it's a lot more efficient than expecting you guys to make decisions based upon who manages to make it to this room. P.S. Parents like those I know who we want our children to have protected bike lanes to be able to go to school. Parents who've been waiting for bike trails in this city for many, many years don't have a chance to come to this meeting. This is a great opportunity to say, how will we use this, this amount of money? I personally would like to see bike trails begun and started things being built. I like Lynn Diebler's plan. I like an east-west trail, a protected trail. I know it's an issue that gets kicked down the road. I know people are concerned about Burbank housing. Months ago, I spoke about the idea of let's have a gate, get off the gate, walk the bike through the park, and continue it on. I think that's possible. I've seen that work in other cities. So I think we should begin the construction on those, planning and constructing an actual dedicated bike trail so our kids could go and people could go and feel safe on a trail that's off-road and that's protected. And I really urge you to use the money for that instead of holding it for that rainy day. To many of us, it's, the absence of this vital public service, bike trails. It's been raining for a while, and thankfully it's raining now too, this month. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. We have another speaker. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Michael Boynton. I live here in Sebastopol, and I'm just coming out in support of the money to be spent on the bike trail. I think it's an invaluable resource for any town to increase its livability, and to spend the money elsewhere is to lose an opportunity to benefit so many people, their safety and their enjoyment of this progressive town. Thank you.
All right, thank you for those comments. Anybody else wanting to speak? You are, okay. I wasn't sure if you were putting your coat on to leave or sending it down to come. Yeah, thank you. I know it's that kind of coat on, coat off evening. All right, welcome. Thanks for
Thank
staying.
you. Hi, Judith. I am currently not of Sebastopol, but here very frequently and valuing very highly the earth that is around here that it's possible to contact, and the nature it's impossible to be in the midst of. And so I too wanted to add my voice to keeping $200,000. What a lot of plants that could buy. That would be native, that would be medicinal, that would be all kinds of plants that I'm sure the herbalists, the naturalists, the permaculturists, and the Native Americans who might still be around could suggest what kind of planting that would benefit the bees, the butterflies, the birds, and the rest of wildlife. And the things that make people's walks when they come back, when they make it remarkable, when they actually remark on what they saw, that would be because they saw a bunch of swallows or egrets or a fox or a bunch of butterflies or something. So those things all come to where the water is, they come to where the plants are. So I encourage you to take every opportunity, whether it's Greenbelt or whether it's anything else that still remains earth or can be restored to what it can be, and let it be, and not offer the money to consultants who will tell you that, but to the people who know how to do that and have the heart to make it happen. $200,000. That's a lot of plants and butterflies and birds. Thank you.
All righty, thank you for those remarks. Anybody else wishing to speak? Looks like we've got all the comments. Bring this back to the council to see what we'd like to do, given the choices that staff has suggested. Councilmember Eder.
Well, my first question is, well, by way of explanation, well, never mind. My first question is, what is does anybody know what the approximate available balance in the traffic impact fund is right now? Like, is this $200,000 the lion's share of it, or is it a minor percentage of it, or I forget what that balance is.
I know at least 100,000 or half of it comes from the traffic impact fund.
Oh, I thought the whole amount did.
The balance in the account, right?
Yeah, the balance in the account, the traffic impact.
What I showed here is 124,000.
No, I think that's an answer to a different question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see if our city manager can help us. I'm not sure we have access to that.
800, right?
Yeah, I think it's in the 700,000 to 800,000.
That's what I recall. So we're talking about 25% roughly of the available balance.
But there are, in looking at the CIP, there are a number of potential planned uses of that fund. It really isn't a whole lot of money given the cost of almost any transportation-related improvement. So that's, something to keep in mind.
I understand that. I don't know what those other planned projects would consume of that 800,000, so I don't know if 200 is what's left, or, anyway. Where I'm going with this is that, first of all, I really want to commend the engineering manager for his force, for his just wisdom in saying, don't just go out and spend this money because you got money to spend. A, and B, that the bicycle master plan, which, I have personally been convinced through discussions with others that there are some significant flaws in it. For instance, I walked Bodega Avenue where it's proposing a downhill bike lane, and there's a ditch right next to it. So if anything goes wrong, you're either dealing with a car or a vehicle, or you're dealing with a ditch. But there's really not a lot of great options for you as a bicyclist. And going uphill, there's parked cars and, you're struggling to go up the hill. So anyway, I'm getting off track here. But I think the fact that the engineering manager pointed out that this was designed as a system. So if you put in little pieces of it, you're basically just putting in spokes of a wheel, but you still don't have a wheel when you get done. And, kind of the Highway 116 portion of this was the spine of this plan. And without that, it's a lot of the other things don't really make a lot of sense. And the other thing is that, back on December 1st of last year, this council took action to direct staff to return with an agenda item for council to consider the $80,000 feasibility study as a fully agendized item for Class 1 off-road multi-user trails. So I'm wondering if the council would want to consider pushing that item forward, the feasibility study, and using some of this money to fund that feasibility study. I think there's been a pretty clear consensus from the community that they support that, and I wonder if this is an opportunity to fund that with some of this $200,000. If we were going to fund any on-street bicycle improvements at this time, the only one that really makes sense to me is to consider bicycle infrastructure on Morris Street between Highway 116 or Highway 12 and Eddy Lane, because that would then put in place a connector section that would actually connect the Joe Rodota Trail to the West County Trail through Sebastopol. And that would be, would include accompanying signage and whatever it took to make it clear to people that this is how you continue on your way up from the Rodota to the West County Trail. And I don't think we need to spend all this money right now. I'm not sure I have as much faith in us getting the money anytime soon for the 116 improvements, and as I previously stated, I'm not sure I believe in them any longer. I think I jumped at that when I was first elected. It was easy, seemed like an easy way to put some lines on the streets, because we've heard that from the community. We want something on the street, and we could leverage a little bit of money into a lot of money for engineering, and then, I don't know if we're ever going to get that. And I think there's also a lot of wisdom, again, from the engineering manager on some of these sidewalk gap closures. I know we've heard about the inability to get up Bodega Avenue from Golden Ridge to Pleasant Hill. They basically are up in the dirt. I have to think that that's a very expensive project. But, you know, same thing with, I've actually walked on Gravenstein Highway at White Covert Lane in the 8-foot wide shoulder and still almost got hit by a car. And so, you know, I think maybe there's some plan. I know we probably can't cover construction costs at this time, but I think if we did some planning, and maybe some engineering on some of those things, that might be another viable use of this money. But I guess in conclusion, I would just say, I would like to see this money put toward, some of this money put toward the feasibility for the Class 1 multi-user trails.
Okay, are there other comments? I have some, but I'm happy for you to go next, Councilmember Slater.
Sure. The comments made regarding the existing bike ped plan and that it's not a comprehensive, to use the previously stated words, it's not a wheel with a bunch of spokes. Well, I think that it is. It seems to me that it's a pretty comprehensive way to get around town. And the fact that it may have some revisions that are needed, to me, that's absolutely no reason to scuttle the entire plan. It was vetted. I don't remember, our former engineering director was able to list these numbers off the top of her head as to how many public meetings there were held to vet this plan, and it was not an insignificant number. It's not new, and it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody what's in it. And what we have now, in my opinion, is pushing 40% of the cost of the on-street, in-town projects. We've got roughly $550,000 worth of work, which includes the design phase. And what we have is a $200,000 amount to put towards that potentially, and that's almost 40% of that. That's significant, and I'm fairly certain that that $200,000 would more than cover the design phase, and that is for the entire system. That's not piecemealing it, that's not a little bit here or a little bit there, just Morris Street, just Covert Lane, just whatever. It's the entire system, and it moves the entire project forward in a major way. I'm certainly aware of the sidewalk gaps. The one that has been stated repeatedly on Bodega Avenue between Golden Ridge and Pleasant Hill, that's a neighborhood that I spend a fair amount of time in, and I understand that. There's the housing for our elders is right there in that neighborhood. It would be, that would be great. I'm not saying any of these wouldn't be great, but I think that the biggest bang for our community's buck is moving forward with the big dream.
I just want to add a follow-up thought to that, which I think you may have intended to say too, and that is, if some of this money were used to do the planning work, the design work, then we have something that is project ready in the event there is some kind of grant or something we can apply to for that as well. I mean, it's actually ready in the event we are successful with SCTA getting money, whatever. You don't get very far until you get to that point. So before I go on, let me see if you had comments, Vice Mayor.
Well, one of the things I'd like to address in response to some public comment is the way that funding for transportation projects in small cities works is not necessarily the way that I would like to design it. And we, as a small city, we really cannot afford to accomplish the transportation projects that we would like without getting grant money. And very few small cities go out there and actually just spend their own money to accomplish what their citizens want, because we don't get enough revenue. The amount of revenue we get as a small city is just microscopic. So the smart thing for us to do is always to leverage the money we have, because we can apply for grant money from various transportation agencies like MTC or the feds or et cetera, and when we do that, they won't give us any money if we can't match it. And sometimes the match is a 50-50 match, sometimes it's a 20% match, sometimes it's a 10%. But if we don't have some money to get some skin in the game, they're not going to give us any money. So, my real decision-making process here is how much should we keep in order to be able to apply to leverage this money versus how much do we actually spend. And my comment about if I were designing a system on funding transportation projects in a small city, this is probably the last way I would design it. This is not necessarily a very smart way to design a government. But unfortunately, that's what we have to work with. So the question is, for me, are we going to, is it smart right now to accomplish, to spend money on designing something and hope that then we have spent that money and get some additional funds to accomplish the design? Or do we actually just take some of that money unleveraged and put it into some projects? That's the real question. And I have to say, I tend to think that it's kind of smarter for us to leverage it, but there's two ways to leverage it. One way is to just sit on it and do another grant application. The other way to leverage it is to accomplish a shovel-ready design, because if we have a shovel-ready design, then we can apply to MTC or somebody else and get something done. So that's what I'm weighing, and so I'm saying to my fellow council members, persuade me of which we should do. Can't stay. Or am I misreading?
No, I think you've stated it really well. It's just hard because we want to do more than we have the money to do. And it's frustrating to be in that situation. I'm just going to back up a few minutes before I answer that question and comment to people. I was involved in the Safe Routes to School program. I was involved in all the workup for this master plan. It was extensively publicly vetted, extensively publicly talked about with maps. I'm sorry that Sioux Kelly count on those meetings isn't available right tonight, but like everything here, it was done at a pace that allowed a lot of public input, and it seems completely unreasonable and pretty wasteful right now to trash a plan when it's as good as it could be. Like I said at the last meeting, our streets haven't changed. We've still got the same configuration that we had before. And my experience, having walked everywhere in town, having participated in the Sebastopol Walks program and ridden a bicycle around town in a bicycle as a commuter to Santa Rosa, and also ridden a tandem around, that most of the traffic is going across town where the hill is slider. This idea of an east-west crossing just puts people in a whole lot of hills. And cyclists aren't going to do hills, particularly beginning people, and beginners aren't going to want to go on the roads, just like people don't want to walk on Main Street or Healdsburg Avenue or Petaluma Avenue, because that isn't the pleasant area of town. The pleasant area of town is our local street network that is through the flatter part of town, and that's the part that is planned that links all the schools, which means the families have a way to get around, other than using cars, which is also one of our goals, to create alternative transportation. So to me, this plan is so valuable that I think it's worth earmarking this money for the local street route. Meanwhile, knowing that it's there in the event we can apply for a grant or several grants, or reapplying for a grant for the major highway network, and see if we can, see where we succeed first. I mean, I really think we're in the same place that we were when the grant was being submitted and under submission. We have two possibilities, and for me, I'm favoring the local street network, as Henry's saying, done as a complete network, not pieced out. I have to admit, I was trying to argue with Sue Kelly about piecing it out because I wanted to get something on the streets for people. And it doesn't concern me if we do that and it leaves people on the main roads, because people don't want to ride on those main roads anyway, a whole lot. So I think we have a workable plan, and what we need to do is make this decision on save the money or devote some of the money to a design project. And I don't see really why we can't do both. If the design work is going to get us to shovel ready, we have one piece of action that could possibly take off. If the money is there and it can go to back up a grant, then maybe that happens first. But I also think the council may want to make a commitment to increase this fund and intentionally put chunks of money into this work each year until we do build up significant money where we can do something of some great import to the public. The sidewalk closures and the gaps, those are all great, but they're small, and I think they're too small in value, and they benefit fewer people than a bicycle network would. And there are also some of these things that we could get done. For instance, when a developer comes and does something with that property on Bodega Avenue there on the way to Pleasant Hill, they're going to be responsible for finishing the sidewalk, not us, not the city, and not with our limited money. So I don't like waiting for all those things, but I see it as a possibility. Those would be my preferences to continue on the course of action we're on, to commit to dedicating more money to this fund. And then the question tonight is, do we have an agreement that moving forward with the design work on the local streets would be worthy of some part of this 200,000? Right now, okay, go ahead.
Just a question. Is there any idea you can estimate what the design phase might run us?
I'm gonna be very brave and say I didn't think it'd be any more than $50,000.
Okay, that gives us a ballpark, thank you. That's all I was
You know you're
looking
gonna hang me with that in about 6 months.
for. I know better. I'm in that business.
You think it'll be more than?
I don't know.
No, I don't know either.
But we can hold to it.
I know.
Man, what I tried to do, I thought that might be a question. What I tried to do was look at what that kind of design work was compared to what money was spent on the 116, because that's much more complicated. And that was the logic.
Okay.
May I make a point? I mean, I don't want to, because y'all having a discussion, I'm still not sure.
Henry, if you have more to help us with, please do, because it
Well,
looks like we're taking a thinking moment here.
I just wanted to point out that the conversation about putting money aside and trying to build it over time to help ourselves, I thought really resonated with me. Because I just got done working on the community development block grant. You know, we're using that money for ADA stuff. And what's interesting is that has a parallel. That grant money started becoming available fiscal year 11-12, and pretty much at a pace of between $30,000 and $60,000 a year, that money's been added to. And what's that done is now we're finally to the point where there's enough money. A, we've hired an architect, but B, we should be pretty darn close with the grant money to be able to do the Ives complex. So, you know, here's a case where we put some money aside every year, and lo and behold, yeah, it's a few years later, we're doing something with it. So that ties into what was our mayor said. I think that makes good sense to me.
Okay, is there any other discussion?
Well, yes. I think perhaps my comments were misconstrued in that it might have sounded like I was saying we should abandon the bicycle master plan, and that certainly was not my intent. I think what I was trying to point out is it's one thing to look at a purple dotted line on a map, and another thing to go out there and actually try to ride a bicycle in that environment and go, this is like one of the scariest things I've ever done. And I reported serious injury attempting this. So I think all it is, you know, plans and master plans and blah, blah, blah are all fine and good, but sometimes reality checks are called for, you know? And you know, it's the main street with the bikes down it. Forget that 4-foot deep ditch, you know? The other thing I wanted to say, and I still say that, you know, without the major routes being covered, a lot of these roads get you to a major road with nowhere to go at that point. And the last thing I'll say is, I'm unclear really if an increase in bicycle ridership will occur as a result of a Cheryl painted on the road. I think right now, you know, the limited bicycling I do in this town is not dependent upon markings on the street. If I want to get from here to there, I ride down the streets to get me from here to there, and I'm just careful. And I don't know if I would be more inclined to ride on another street if it had some type of bicycle infrastructure on it. And so, I mean, by saying, I guess I am kind of calling the whole plan into question, but I just don't know if people are gonna modify their behavior like it seems like we think they are just by putting stuff on the streets. I just don't know. It'd be interesting if we could find a study of before and after ridership in a city that did these types of things. But I just don't know if human nature works that way or not. So anyway, so I haven't come to any conclusions or recommendations. But I did want to clarify that I was not, you know, if we did any of this on street, again, I'd reiterate, the portion on Morris makes sense to me. It actually it finishes a missing link there.
Okay, you go, then I want to answer that too.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say this. We recently rode bikes all over Brooklyn. I'm probably repeating myself. 5 different types of bike lanes, and I can tell you, I wouldn't have thought to take a bike out in the traffic with all the cars, and this is not Manhattan, so it's really scaled down, it's Brooklyn, without the sharrows and the bike lanes and the signs and the community acceptance, the community culture that you can get around on a bike. I mean, I really wouldn't have done it without being in that environment. Well, everyone's doing this, so I'll do it, but I thought it was scary, but I'm doing it, okay? And, you know, we went all around Brooklyn to a number of parks, et cetera, et cetera. And my other comment is, I think this town is far more walkable than it's bikeable. So I'm not sure we're gonna change behaviors when it comes to bikes. I think there are a lot of people who said, oh, I'd ride a bike, and they haven't ridden a bike in, you know, 10 years or 20 years. And if they got on a bike, they wouldn't enjoy it because it would be a scary new experience, even if it was on the flats. So, you know, I think in some ways, improvements about walkability are more beneficial because more people have changed their behaviors and walked, and we've seen that, you know, with the lit up crosswalks, et cetera. So I'm not willing to give up bikeability. I just know that a lot of people say they will, and they're not likely to because they haven't and they don't. So you had another comment, and then let's move to a motion.
I would like to move that we direct staff to prepare an RFP for the design phase of the City Streets project, and we can see what that comes back to be, and either move forward or not, and then with a possible balance that is put in a reserve fund to leverage for future projects. I'm not sure if that's the right phraseology for that.
Okay, I'll second that for discussion. I'm not sure I understand the second part of that, so just say that again so we get it. Put that in a reserve fund?
In a reserve fund for use for future bike ped improvements. And I'm not sure,
Board matching funds.
matching,
matching
Vice Mayor.
fund needs, maybe matching fund needs for future projects.
Okay. Matching fund needs for future projects.
Does that make sense?
I think so.
Okay,
I know what you mean.
All right, can somebody read with the whole thing? Direct staff to prepare an RFP for the design phase of the city streets project. And then what's the second part? Put money in the reserve fund?
The
The remaining.
remaining funds
Okay, I got it.
into whatever the vice mayor just said.
Into a reserve fund toward matching funds for future projects.
Maybe this or future projects.
All right, so, do we want to hear it again?
Yes.
This time we're going to have Mary read it.
Yes.
And we'll get the motion worded.
Direct staff to prepare an RFP for the design phase of the city streets project and put remaining funds into reserve fund for matching fund needs for future projects.
Okay, is that acceptable to the maker of the motion? That was what you intended? Okay, I second it? So I'll second that one. So when you say city streets project, do you mean the local streets? What is it called in the bicycle master plan? I think that's what we want to make sure we understand you're talking about.
Class 2, Class 3, and Sharrows. It's
Yeah.
those 3 items on the CIP. Page A3,
Is it called the local street network or something? Does it have a name?
it says Class 2 bike lanes on local streets. Right below is bikeways on local streets, Sharrows, and then the third one is bikeways on local streets, Class 3.
Okay,
They're about between half and 2/3 of the way down the page.
is that important to add to the motion?
That more clearly defines it.
Okay, so if you'll add that to your amendment, your motion that way, and I will continue it. I hope we're not gonna do that again,
Yeah.
really. So that's acceptable to me. Any other questions or comments? Then I think we're ready to vote. All those in favor say aye.
Wait, did we have more discussion? I was
just asked.
distracted.
I'm sorry, I did ask. Are there any
I
more
was
comments?
distracted by a
Oh,
member of the audience,
okay.
sorry.
Yeah.
Distracted. My first question is we're directing staff to prepare an RFP to do the engineering work, that this direction to staff was predated at the December 1 meeting to direct staff to prepare an RFP for the feasibility study for the multi-use trails. So are we doing both directions to staff to do 2 RFPs for 2 different projects?
I think we have a staff answer.
The council asked for that item to come back for discussion, so the council hasn't allocated or approved funding for the feasibility, the Class 1 trail feasibility study. That item will be coming back to the council in a month or so. And so that's a separate item from this. But it's a potential other use of the traffic impact fee fund.
Okay, so it's not a matter of one having precedent over another then?
No, I mean, there is a limit to how much money is in the traffic impact fee fund, and that, we need to keep an eye on that, be conscious of the decisions that have been made or commitments made. And so if you make this commitment tonight, you need to, when you look at other possible uses in the future, such as the possible feasibility study, consider what we've already committed to.
And thus far, we've gotten a rough estimate of around $50,000 engineering study costs for the on-street improvements and around $80,000 or so for multi-use trails. So that's about 130, so we've actually still got a balance in this $200,000 pot of money we're just itching to spend. So I would just, I would ask the council to keep that in mind when we determine allocation of future funds.
I think we all know we need to do that. We're mindful of that. Okay. I'll slow down here and make sure I've got all the comments on this motion that's pending. Anything more anyone want to say? No, then all those in favor say aye. Opposed, abstention, so that will carry with a 4-0 vote. So it is just past 10:30. We're a little late. I don't know, somebody may have been filibustering. I got out my material for our next item, which is discussion, continuing discussion and action on approval of the Laguna de Santa Rosa Wetlands Preserve Management Plan. So it is 10:30, and I would recommend we move forward on this item because it's been before the council. This is the third time. We also have the committee assignments that were continued from last time, and it's important to put those in play because a number of committees are already starting meeting 2016. And then we also have a calendaring issue we want to talk about so we can look to 2016. Each of those are vital items, and I would ask the council to continue to number 11 and hopefully make it through the second two items, 12 and 13, rather quickly after number 11. Is that agreeable to everybody? And isn't? I'm seeing so. Thank you very much, because if it weren't, we would just have another agenda like this, and the next one will be just as full with additional work. So we've got quite a lot of material here. So I want to start with the staff report from our planning director.
I'll be brief, since the council has reviewed this a couple of times previously and had a lot of public input as well. Since the last discussion, several changes, which are in green ink, have been made to the draft Laguna Preserve Management Plan, including addition of a matrix to provide permitting guidance for different types of possible activities in the preserve, an identification of a location for a kayak put-in improvement, and addition of language calling for investigation of a possible trail connection from Highway 12 east of the bridge down to Meadowlark Field, and a call for the city to work with county regional parks for improvement of the Joe Rodova Trail entry area, as well as other miscellaneous additions and changes to the plan. So we are recommending adoption of the plan, and I'll leave it at that.
All right. Are there questions of staff for tonight? Yes? Go ahead, Vice Mayor.
Okay, so I apologize for these questions, but as you know, I was absent last meeting, so didn't hear everything that happened while there were the minutes, and I'm still talking. So my first question is, how when there is a situation of blackberries and willows, do you think that this plan adequately addresses, and how does it address the situation of blackberry invasion that is mingled with willows? That's a trick question.
I'm wondering if you want to kick that one to our consultant team.
Yeah, possibly. I think they might want to contribute as well, but the plan does recognize certainly the problem of the non-native blackberry species that's out there in the Laguna Preserve, and has recommendations and protocols for